When you hear the name Alexander the Great, you probably picture a legendary conqueror on a powerful horse, leading armies and building one of the biggest empires in history. And you're not wrong. But what if I told you the blueprint for that entire empire was drawn up when he was just a kid? Today, we're diving into the incredible, intense training and education that was designed to forge not just a king, but a true legend.
Right. That's the key question. To really get the conqueror, you first have to understand the boy. How does a prince from a kingdom that many Greeks kind of look down on get the skills, the knowledge, and honestly, the sheer ambition to completely reshape the ancient world? That's the origin story we're exploring.
And that story, like so many great ones, begins with family. But this wasn't just any royal family. No, this was a household practically boiling over with power, ambition, and sky-high expectations.
I mean, just look at this combination. You've got his dad, King Philip II, an absolute military and political genius. Then you've got his mom, Queen Olympias, fiercely intelligent, super ambitious, and from a powerful dynasty herself. Alexander was born in 356 BC, right into the middle of this pressure cooker, the official heir to a kingdom that his father was actively turning into a superpower.
So yeah, you can forget about a normal childhood. From day one, his entire life was basically a leadership training program. Even as a really young boy, he was already known for being incredibly brave and having a mind that was just razor sharp. He wasn't just being prepared for greatness, it was demanded of him.
So how exactly do you train a kid to be a king? Well, in ancient Macedonia, the answer was simple. You start with intense, almost brutal discipline. This was not about making him comfortable. It was all about making him tough.
And the man in charge of this was his first major teacher, a guy named Leonidas. Now, Leonidas had a very simple philosophy. A king has to be tougher than any of his soldiers. Period. That meant zero luxuries. No fancy snacks his mom tried to sneak into his luggage. Leonidas would literally check his bags for them. It was all about building an unbreakable character from the ground up. And his training was this perfect, tough combination. On one side, they were sharpening his mind. He was learning to read, to play instruments like the lyre, and he had to memorize these massive epic poems. But on the other side, they were hardening his body, waking up at dawn, grueling physical work, and living on the simplest food. The goal was to create a leader who was both brilliant and totally unbreakable.
So after this foundation of pure discipline was set, Alexander's father decided it was time to level up. And he didn't just go out and hire a good tutor. No, he hired maybe the most famous thinker in the entire world at the time. So let's just clarify what a philosopher was back then. In ancient Greece, these guys were the ultimate thinkers. They were the scientists, the experts on logic, the people who asked the biggest questions about life and the universe. Hiring a top philosopher as a personal tutor, that would be like getting Neil deGrasse Tyson or someone like that to teach you science one-on-one. And that's pretty much what King Philip did. When Alexander was 13, he became the student of Aristotle himself. Philip wanted him so badly that he actually rebuilt Aristotle's destroyed hometown to convince him to take the job. He then set up this incredible school in a peaceful, beautiful place called Mysa, just for Alexander and a few of his closest friends. And Aristotle taught him, well, everything. Not just philosophy and how to think logically, but biology, medicine, how the stars work. But maybe most importantly, he taught Alexander how to ask questions, how to observe the world really closely, and how to figure things out for himself. This sparked a love of science that Alexander would have for the rest of his life. But out of everything he learned, one single book mattered more than all the others: Homer's epic poem, The Iliad, which tells the story of the Trojan War. Alexander was completely obsessed with its main hero, the warrior Achilles, who he actually believed was one of his ancestors. To Alexander, this wasn't just a story. It was a roadmap for his own glorious life.
Okay, so you've got all this training, the tough discipline, the world-class education, the heroic stories. That's all great in theory, right? But eventually, it had to be tested. And pretty soon, Alexander got his chance to prove that this wasn't just stuff he learned in a classroom.
The most famous story from his youth is all about this incredible horse named Bucephalus. This was a magnificent but totally wild horse that no one, not the best trainers, not the strongest soldiers, could tame. But Alexander didn't try to use force. He used his brain. He just watched, and he noticed that the horse seemed to be terrified of its own shadow on the ground. So what did he do? He just calmly walked over, turned the horse to face the sun, and the shadow vanished.
The horse calmed right down, and Alexander hopped on. This was a massive moment. His father was so blown away by his son's mix of intelligence and courage that he supposedly told him that Macedonia was too small a kingdom for him. It was this incredible prediction of everything that was about to happen. Now, of course, he also had to master the art of war. His father had totally changed the game with a military formation called the phalanx. It was basically this tight, deep block of soldiers, all holding these incredibly long spears called sarissas. It looked like a giant human hedgehog moving across the battlefield. Alexander learned how to command this beast of a formation on top of becoming an expert horseman and swordsman. And he learned really, really fast, because at just 16 years old, his father left him in charge, not of an army, in charge of the entire kingdom while he was away on a campaign. So what does a 16-year-old regent do with that kind of power? Well, if you're Alexander, you immediately face a rebellion, you lead an army out to meet them, and you crush it. Just a couple of years later, he was fighting right beside his dad at the huge Battle of Chaeronea, where he personally led the final, decisive cavalry charge that won the entire battle. He had proven to everyone he wasn't just a smart kid anymore, he was a brilliant and totally fearless commander. So, by the time he was in his late teens, all the pieces were there. He had the brain of a philosopher, the skills of a hardened warrior, the ambition of a hero from his favorite stories, and the real-world experience of a veteran general. In his mind, he wasn't just hoping for greatness, he was absolutely destined for it. Which brings us to the big final question. When you look back at this totally unique upbringing, the hardcore discipline, the genius tutor, the early taste of real power in battle, what do you think? Was his destiny forged in those early years? Was the empire he eventually built simply the inevitable result of the boy he was made to be?